I know you're all excited about our next session, but I'd like to introduce you to a gentleman whose job it is to constantly figure out what you need and look for it everywhere and then get it to you, because he is really a solutions person, whether he's working on our national media to get us the very, very best exposure for the price, or he's helping you solve challenges that may arise in your business. So it is with a great deal of pleasure that I introduce you to your Senior Vice President of Franchise Services and our new Director of Design, David Hazley. David.
Well, I have a really good job this morning because I get to introduce this person, and he's already been a crowd favorite, I can tell. So let me just tell you a little bit about this guy. Our guest this morning is founder and principal of New York City-based design firm Thom Filicia Incorporated. Since launching the acclaimed enterprise in 1998, Thom Filicia Incorporated has earned him widespread acclaim and notable clients, including Tina Fey, Rosewood Hotels and Resorts, Delta Airlines, Grace Bay Club, Jennifer Lopez, W Hotels, and others in the worlds of finance, sports, media, fashion, and hospitality. He is universally known for his ability to create stunning, modern yet classic interiors that retain an inviting aesthetic that reflect the individuality of his clients. His unmistakable design sensibility has earned him countless accolades from the design world, including being named by House Beautiful as one of their top 100 designers. Lux Magazine named him to their gold list. House & Garden dubbed him an international tastemaker, and Elle Decor regaled him as an A-list designer. Additionally, he has been featured in the New York Times, Architectural Digest, the Wall Street Journal, People Magazine, InStyle, Vogue Home, O, and many other national publications. The list goes on and on what this guy has done. And talking to him last night and telling me all the things that he has going on in his business, I don't know where he even finds the time to be here. And so I am so grateful that he is here today. He has also been on numerous television shows. For example, Oprah Winfrey, Good Morning America, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, The View, Rachel Ray, The Today Show, Ellen, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, Secret Celebrity Drag Race, and many more. He has hosted several shows for Style Network, including Dress My Nest and Tacky House, and has been a featured talent on the HGTV network. It is my pleasure to introduce interior designer, product designer, author, tastemaker, and television personality influencer, Thom Filicia. Come on.
Wow, that was awesome. I'm also bringing my design director with us. Yeah. Congratulations, by the way, and thank you for that. That was a lovely. I was like, who the hell is that guy? Yeah, that's funny. Hi, this is Lago. He's my rescue dog, who I'm pretty sure if there's a psychologist or psychiatrist in the room, they would say those two have a dysfunctional relationship. He has all the attributes of like a bad boyfriend. He's like, he doesn't like anybody. He's like, they're not good enough. He's like, it's just you and me. Forget these other people.
Anyway.
No, but he literally, I know everyone here has come up to him and say, can I pet him? And I'm like, you could try. And he like looks, he just kind of does a quick sort of like.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's very funny.
We're down in the lobby bar yesterday, and of course, people would come up to Lago, forget Thom, you know, they came up to Lago, and Lago's going, I don't want any of this.
Yeah. He's like, what's happening? But you know, it's funny. So I actually adopted him in was actually an antique show in Long Island, and they were partnered with ARF, which is Animal Rescue. He was there with a bunch of other dogs, and I was there with another designer, Alexa. Do you know? So she was
Alexa
there.
Hampton?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we were there. We were kind of hosting this thing, and there were these dogs running around. And he was there, and I ended up adopting him. And then I had another American Bulldog, and they became best buddies. She was about 7 years older than him. Sadly, she passed away right after COVID. And so he was like, I basically am the new Lexi. Like, he took all of his love and devotion for her, and now it's like, so we have to, we're trying to, I think we're gonna get another dog so that I can start dating again.
What do you think about that?
He's like, what? I don't know, why is he talking to us?
Yeah. But I love you more.
He's like, is that guy going to be here the whole time we're up here? Look at him. He's like giving you the side eye. He's so funny.
Anyway,
So
thank you for joining us, both of you.
Thank you, David.
And I have some questions for you.
Yes.
Okay, to learn a little bit more about Thom
Okay, I'm going to
Filicia.
turn this off and make sure it doesn't do anything. Here we go.
And my first question is a little bit long one, so I apologize. But your work is so grounded in an aesthetic sensibility. In fact, you even state that belief in your philosophy. Clearly, how and where you grew up influenced your work today. Can you give us a little background on how and where you grew up, and how that influenced you, and when you knew you wanted to get into interior design?
Okay. Wow. Okay, so let's start with when I knew I wanted to get into an interior design, because I feel like that's a good springboard. So, and I'm sure as you know, the designers in the room or people that were very passionate about interior design growing up and have landed in this space, when I was a little kid, I was always very interested in sort of what was going on around me, and I just thought everybody knew, like, you know, the details of like every single thing in their house and all of their friends' houses. And so I just was really hyper aware of all of those things around me, and I really loved them. And so I was in like 5th grade. And, well, the first thing was whenever my parents would leave the house, I would move things around, and my parents were like, "Where'd that go?" And I'm like,
no one
here
has ever done that, right?
I didn't like that. I didn't like that. So that's in like a different area now. But the other thing was when I really realized it when I was in 5th grade, I was drawing on my desk, as you're not supposed to do. You know, you're like, but Mrs. Chamberlain went away for like vacation or something. And we had a substitute, and as you know, kids always torture the substitute teacher. And oh yeah, we can do that. Yeah, she lets us do that all the time. Oh yeah, we can eat in class, and we can snap while you're talking. So I was like drawing on my desk. I drew the whole week. Anyway, she comes back. She was very upset, and I drew this house. And I knew that I had to stay after class and erase it and write on the board, I won't do it again. But before they did that, Mr. Byer, my principal, came up to the room, and he and I took a picture together in front of the desk. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, this can't be that bad. So maybe I'm not great at spelling, so this could be my thing. So then in 6th grade, I ended up because of that and just being really interested in design and art, I ended up getting into an advanced art class in 6th grade. And then myself and my friend Julie Banks, we started designing houses, and then Mr. Byer would put them on the, next to his office, like the bulletin board. And so it was like a big deal. It was like being on the cover of the New York Times for like 6th graders. And I was never up there because I never won a spelling bee or didn't do math real great. So anyways, so this was that was my only way for getting up there. So anyways, I did that. It was real. And then it was like, I was designing these houses, and my dad taught me how to draft. It was like, he had T-square and all that kind of stuff. So I started, that was the beginning of sort of what I was thinking of doing in design. I started with that, and then, and I knew at that point I was going to end up in architecture or interior design or maybe industrial design, and so I just kind of kept sort of keeping my eye on all of those kind of areas as I was kind of going through school, and then I went in, when I started looking at colleges, I would go and I'd be like, so what do you guys do? Like, I'd go to the architecture department and say, like, so this is great, I love everything, this is really cool, so what do you guys do on the weekends? They're like, we don't have weekends. And I'm like, really? They're like, yeah. They're like, we are in the studio 24/7. And then I went to the interior design department. And I was like, what do you guys do on the weekends? They're like, oh, we go from party to party. I was like, this is going to work way better for me. So anyway, so that's, yeah. So then I ended up studying interior design, and so I was an interior design student, graduated with an interior design degree from Syracuse University, and I loved it. I was in a fraternity. I was kind of like a real sort of across the board kind of person. So I was in the art school, I was in a fraternity, I was like, I was definitely not in like just art, I was kind of doing everything. And I actually recommend that to almost, I always say like, have as many different, amazing experiences when you're learning, because it all works. Half of my clients are like exactly like the people that were in the Greek system. So I know how to communicate really well with them. It always starts with a cocktail. All right. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started. But the other part of the question was about sort of like, my aesthetic and sort of, working, working that kind of into like sort of my background and my aesthetic. And I think the reason that sort of comes into sort of the narrative of like what I do, or even sort of the foundation of what I do, is that when I first started working, so when I was in college, I wanted to work at Parrish Hadley, which is like this really sort of, old school New York City firm that like, they did the Gettys and the Vanderbilts and all that. And so I was like, this is where I want to work, because I thought it would be really cool. And I loved Elbert Hadley. He was a modernist, and Sister Parrish was very traditional, and they kind of merged, and they were kind of this interesting duo that was a combination of both very modern and very hyper classical, or like traditional, or very American, this veritable kind of New York City firm. So I thought this would be a great place to start. So anyway, so I just cold called them, and I said, hi, this is Thom Filicia from Syracuse University. May I speak with Elbert Hadley? I think they thought he was going to get like an honorary degree or something. I didn't say this is a student, you know what I mean? Because I figured, I had a better chance of getting to the guy. So anyway, so I did that. I spoke to Elbert. He was really gracious and set up an appointment for me to come in and show him my portfolio. And I did, and I ended up getting one of the internships. They gave out 3, for the summer. And and the other people that were there, I was like, they were like, they all decorated their parents' houses. And so it was really, so I was there, and that was like my introduction to that sort of the design world at that level. And then I went back to school, finished my senior year, and they hired me out of school, and I went back, and it was amazing. But, starting at that level, which was really an amazing experience and really eye-opening, it was also just like, is this all, I basically were working for the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, and it just felt very kind of in this like weird moment. And everybody's like, oh my God, that lamp is so pretty. It's only $5,000. That's such a good deal. And I'm like, so it was just this really rarefied world. And I just always thought like, gosh, there's like, I feel like our industry at that time was really stuck in this kind of, in that space. There wasn't a lot of, there wasn't a real common language of design, And all of a sudden I started seeing these shows pop up on television like, While You Were Out or Design on a Dime. And I think they were in their infancy, and they weren't really designers that were hosting them. They were mostly people that used to be models, and they were kind of produced, and they weren't, and I know some of them today who have become designers and are really good, but, they started out in that space, and they were produced by production people, and there wasn't really, people would leave their house and their neighbors would put grass on their floor, and they would come home and like want to kill their neighbors. I mean, it was funny, but it wasn't really design. And I thought, but it's interesting that design is starting to become like something that everybody's talking about, And it was almost like when in the automotive industry, they started talking about safety in every car, not just the really expensive ones. And it was when design started happening, like Crate and Barrel started doing like really beautiful designs that were more accessible, that were much like what you would see at like the design buildings in Chicago or New York City or Atlanta. And so I was like, this moment is starting to happen. And I thought it was really exciting. So I've always enjoyed sort of having that, and we were talking about this last night, the good, better, best, and sort of the mix of that. And so for me, I feel like everybody has a mix of good, better, best, whatever your good, better, best is. And also when you're starting out in the world as a young person in your first apartment, good, better, best, is very different than when you're in 10 years later, or when you're raising a family, or when you're buying your second home or your ski house. Good, better, best starts to change and become sort of applicable to like where you are, what you're doing, and so that was something that was very important to me, because growing up I would say, like, I grew up in upstate New York. It's very Midwestern in its kind of like sensibility, but what's really great about it is that it's approachable, it's real. Even at the high end, it's still very kind of, it's very approachable. And so I felt like having that background, which is something that I really love, and I gravitate towards that still today. Like whenever I go into a room and there's like 100 people and 3 of them are from the Midwest, I'm always like, these are my new best friends. And it's just really about like that sort of easy, sort of like, approachable, sensibility. And I think that I love that in design. Even when it's a Park Avenue penthouse, I still like it to be something where people feel excited about being there and they feel comfortable and it feels inviting. So I've always incorporated that as part of my sort of aesthetic, and it was always something that I was interested as a business person later on, as that I wanted my, my brand, and this was even before I really understood what brand meant, but it was that sort of, my brand to be something that was not just about being sort of, that sort of unapproachable. I feel like it's a bit old-fashioned for our industry. It's sort of where our industry started, which was just sort of like rich people helping rich people. And now it's just, I think, creative people helping other people that are really excited about living better, whatever that level of better is and wherever they are in that journey.
To circle back a little bit to Albert Hadley,
yes.
because it is
yes.
he is notable. He was
yes.
one of the proponents of American design.
Yes.
He also worked for Sister Parish.
Yes.
Probably one of the most well-known decorators.
That's their partnership.
And so your design bloodline is really impressive, and I didn't want to gloss over that. That's very impressive, and it's there's a long bloodline there. What was your takeaway from working with Albert Hadley? There were so many amazing takeaways from that, because, it was, I would say the interesting thing was that it was very much about keeping it like humble. I think 90% of what they were trying to do for their clients was keep their feet on the ground a little bit. It just was a different time. So being humble at that time, it's not the same thing. It's not exactly what we would do today, but in that world it was. And I loved that about Albert, and I loved about him that he was, he really was a modernist, and he really understood true design. Like, Sister Parish was a society decorator, and they kind of combined their She was the wealthy helping the wealthy.
Right. She was exactly where she came from. Her father was a big finance guy in New York City, and very old world family in New York City and New Jersey. And so she had all of these connections and these friends, and she knew sort of the aesthetic that they were all going for. And Albert kind of came in and really understood the architecture and the bones, and would also introduce things that they wouldn't think to do, and that kind of gave them an edge. So it was a really nice balance. And I actually still to this day, I think even before going to Albert and Sister and working with David and everyone at Parish Hadley, I always liked that sort of balance. I love the balance of things that are timeless and sort of tailored and classic, and I love all of that, but I really do like sort of a little bit of an edge and a little bit of now. And I think if you think about sort of the way we live today, that is very in keeping with sort of where we are. I think we're kind of growing into that sort of aesthetic even more and more. And I just think that they were kind of they were really a springboard for that. And they were a springboard for that for, these sort of major American families. And I just think that what's been fun for me in my career is that I've been able to do that for people that we all recognize who they are, but also for people that are just families that are, or individuals that just want to sort of live more, artfully and more authentically and live in an environment that feels really like them.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question, so thank you. So you've accomplished much in the world of design, obviously, but you're best known for demystifying design and taking away the elitism, which is kind of what you were alluding to, of design, which of course you did very well publicly in your television shows. Talk about your design philosophy and how accessibility plays into it.
Well, I think, television, when I started in television, and I really got into television, which is very funny because I'm sitting here with a dog, but I got into television because I rescued a dog. This is Lago, his name was Paco. He wasn't alive, and he's no longer alive, but I was in my office in New York, and he needed to go out, and it was like a Friday, and I literally was like, hold on. And by the time I got him out, we run to the elevator and he's like twisting his back legs together. We get in the elevator and there's like a bunch of people coming from, all their offices. It happened to be about 12 women in the elevator. We go about a half a floor and we get stuck in between the floors. Now, and my dog is like, and I'm looking at him like, oh shit, this isn't gonna go great. And then there's like a woman on the floor. She gets on the floor and she starts panicking. She's like, oh my God. She's like, I have to tell you. She's like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I've got really bad news. She's like, I am very claustrophobic. And she's sitting on the floor and I go, girl, I got real bad news. My dog's gonna take a dump on you if you don't move. So I'm like, you've got to play with my dog and keep him from going to the bathroom. But what I was doing is I was trying to keep her from being focused on freaking out. And so I was like, trying to keep her, I was like, oh my God, we were pushing the elevator, the fireman button, and they're like, the fire department will be there in like, an hour. I was like, what? Anyway, so I was like, and I knew she'd panic. So I'm like, good news, the fire department's coming. I didn't mention it was going to be an hour, but she was like in her own little moment. And I said, have you ever seen the calendar for the firemen? I'm like, again, are you single? And I'm like, you better get some lipstick going, get ready, because this could be your moment, girl. And so they opened the hatch, and I was like, okay, bad news, not the calendar people, but we're leaving, so we're gonna get out of here. So gotta look at the silver lining. So we get out, and there's this woman, her name was Greg, I swear to God, and she was in that lobby, she was in the elevator, and she said, what do you do? Like, are you a comedian? She asked me. And I said, no. And I said, well, my clients think so. But because of my decorating. No, I'm kidding. But they're like, this must be a side gig. No, but so she said, oh, well, let's get together and have a drink or whatever, you're really fun, or something like that. And then 2 months later, she calls me, and I'm like, oh shit, I never called her back. So I thought she was gonna be mad at me, and she called me and said, no, that's all good, we'll have lunch, but don't worry about it. She said, but there's this TV show, they're looking for a designer who is like, they can't find anyone who has like a resume that they would like for the person to be on the show, and that's like, is approachable and is fun to communicate with for people that don't know about design. So they were having a hard time finding this person. So then she said, I put your name in the hat. I hope you don't, if that's okay. And I said, well, what's it about? And she didn't really know. And that's really how I got introduced to working in television. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that you were saying keeping it sort of, approachable. I think that, being able to communicate in a way that is comfortable for people that know about design and know about, architecture, and it's, you can have that conversation, which is great, but also knowing that when you're talking to someone who doesn't know about all of that, but is interested in it, how to talk to them and how to make them not feel like they're not invited to the party, And so I think that that's something that in our industry, we have to know more and more today, because I think our clients are coming from a variety of different places, not like years ago where everybody was like, my parents had a designer, I have a designer, I know this movie. Today, there's a lot of people who are like, we just made $1 billion doing something in social media, and now we need a designer, and we've never done this before, and so we need someone to kind of guide us through the process. And so sometimes you have a client that's like their first time out of the gate, and other times you have clients that this is it's old hat for them, and so they know everything, they've been through it. And I think one of the things that makes what we do today different than designers in the past is that we have to have that skill set where we can really kind of guide people through the process and not make them feel like, that we're talking down to them. So I think that was something that I was very comfortable doing from the get-go. And actually, I remember at one time, a friend of mine who's an event planner, and he's a very hoity-toity guy in New York City, and he said, I have my shoes custom made and all this stuff. And he said, I just have the hardest time talking to people that don't know about design when I'm selling, when he needs a big event planner. And I just said to him, I said, well, did you ever, when you were in college, do you remember not knowing what you were learning? Like it's not brain surgery, And I just said, it's an interesting concept to me that's what he was saying. And he's not a close friend of mine probably for that reason, just fundamentally. But also as a business person, I just didn't understand where he was coming from. And as a modern person, and also as a fair person and as a nice person, it just didn't add up to me in any way. But I think that is old-fashioned to me. And I think that being more multifaceted as a professional, as a person, as a friend, I just think that, as a person out in the world, I just think being more, inclusive and multifaceted, I think is a modern way of being and doing business and being a friend and being a professional. So I think that I was lucky that having someone like Albert really be that first major influence, and he was somebody that was teaching, he was teaching college level classes, and he was, he was partners with Sister Parish, and so he was definitely playing all of those and wearing those hats. And I think coming from Nashville, he was very understated and a little bit more reserved. He just had a really nice
approachable. So you kind of took that away from him as well.
Yeah, well,
if this guy can be like that,
yes,
I can be like that.
Yeah, it's it was almost like permission to be like, this is actually, you would think it would be the opposite, which is, I think, what I was imagining. And it wasn't. He was actually, that wasn't his thing. So it was really refreshing. And it was also it opened up okay, this can happen. And what was exciting is it not only could happen, he wrote the foreword to my first book. And I asked him that because I just was I feel like you were doing this in a way before it was even a thing to be doing. And I started in the industry where, when I was working in television, it was in its infancy. It was not a very, when I was offered to do television, I knew when I called around to designers that I worked for or people that I knew in the industry, oh, what are you doing? Are you crazy? So they were like, no, this is not, you don't want to do this. This could really damage your career. And they were right, it could have. But I thought at one point, I was I asked my dad, I asked my brother, I asked people I worked with in the field. And pretty much everybody was this is risky. It's not like today where I think it's it's kind of like a little feather in your cap. if you do something on local television or in a morning show, or it's a really nice thing, it's like, and you can manage it to be a really good thing. But in the beginning, it was a little bit of a risk because, high-end designers or the people that we work with in our field kind of looked down on, like, it wasn't where it is today. So it was a risk. But I thought to myself, if I was a painter, right, or if I was a sculptor, and I was working in bronze, and all of a sudden there was this new material, that plastic or acrylic, I know myself, I would be excited about exploring that new material. So to me, television was this kind of new medium for designers, for us to start to really communicate with more people than just the people that need designers. People that were just interested in design and maybe couldn't afford designers yet. And I saw us as kind of like, I saw television as creating this sort of gateway for people that weren't in the design world and weren't hiring designers, and maybe weren't even, doing any of the things that we do every day, but were interested in it. And I think that was what was exciting about it to me, was that it basically, you have, families sitting at home and watching shows about design, and all of a sudden, the kids maybe want to be a designer, or, dad sells his company, and the next thing you know, they have 2 houses and they need someone to help them. So they kind of have a little bit of a understanding of what that process looks like, even though on television it looks like it happens in one day. Which on my last show I said, we have to break this myth because it's driving me crazy. Because they're like, so we gave them a new kitchen, it's really beautiful, it costs $1,100, and we did it in one day. Isn't that incredible?
Wait a minute, are you saying it didn't happen in one day and it didn't cost $1,100?
I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, so I was like, can we please start to give people at least somewhat realistic numbers? So that was my whole thing with sort of the media and television and all of that has always been trying to elevate what people see in that space so that when they see it, it's sort of real and it's interesting and exciting, and also that it's not unapproachable, because I do find that sometimes I watch things that are happening on television and sometimes the conversations, I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to give us a good reputation. It's a little bougie. And especially for television, people are inviting you into their home. It's not, you want it, I don't love it. But anyways, so that's always been kind of I don't know if I answered that question.
No, you did. You did. Did
I? I kind of forgot the question. I might be hungover.
Getting to know you, you haven't lost, even though you've been hanging around New York for a long time and been on many television shows. I have to say, you really haven't lost your Midwest type roots, and that's a compliment to you.
Thank you.
That's very good.
Thank you. That's really awesome.
I think this next point is very important for all designers to learn. In your bio, it states that you are able to create stunning, modern, yet classic.
I think we probably wrote that.
Yet classic interiors that retain an inviting aesthetic that reflects the individuality of your clients. Yeah. Can you elaborate on this a little, and how do you learn about the individuality of your clients?
I mean, so 2 things. One is, I think when you are starting a new project, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant or an individual or a family or whatever type of project you're starting, I think being really interested and having questions and spending time really connecting with those people or that person or that brand is really important, because understanding where you are is really going to help you create the roadmap as to where you want to go and how you want to take it there. And I personally think that when I walk into a room and it is really pretty and beautifully put together, I think that's great. But if it doesn't have a soul or a personality, and if it doesn't have quirkiness, and these are the kind of things that Albert always talked about, those little fun moments or things that are quirky or unexpected and that are just really personality and lifestyle driven. he was already talking about that before the word lifestyle was really a common word, or branding, or any of the words that we terms that we use today sort of to describe what we do.
How do you get to know your client?
To
do all that, you have got to get to know them.
Yeah, I just think that you do what we're doing right now. You ask questions and you answer them based on sort of being authentic and honest, not presenting. I don't love creating spaces that make people feel good about sort of their success. I like creating interiors and spaces that make people feel excited about participating with that environment. And to me, that becomes that's when to me a design is really exciting and really successful. I also think that when someone walks into a room and they know, and they say like, oh my God, this is exactly, my friend Susan, and this is totally her sensibility. To me, that is what the benchmark for a great design is. It's not that it looks like I did it or my firm did it. Hopefully it looks like it was professionally done, but it looks like the person or the people or the brand that you're working with for that project. And I think as a designer, your curiosity about that person and that brand should trump sort of what you think you should be doing. I think you have to take the ego out of it, because what happens, I think, is that when you do that, your work gets repetitive, because you're just doing what you think everybody should have. You're like, yeah, that's great, but you're not going to get that, and it's ugly. I mean, you have to do that every once in a while. I have decorated more garages. And they're like, where should we put this? I'm like, I have the perfect place.
And attics, right?
You don't want this to get a lot of light because the color will fade.
Everybody's probably been there, or at least wanted to be there anyway.
You want to save this for the next generation. It's too special.
Very good. So with all that you've done, you've I don't know how long ago it was, but you've gotten into product design
Yes.
as well.
Yep.
What prompted you to get into product design?
When I was a kid, I was jump back, I really was interested in automotive design. I was thinking of becoming a boat designer. So when I was like in seventh and eighth grade, I was like architect, I had all these things. And so I was kind of in that space. So when I went and looked at schools, I wanted a school that had industrial design, interior design, architecture, and a Greek system.
Priorities.
I know my parents were like not proud, but they were like, whatever. They're like, he likes to drink and party. But but they were, I in college, it's funny, there was this, so junior JPMA, Junior Manufacturing, JPMA, Junior Product Manufacturers Association of America. Okay, they come to school, senior year. I'm like I feel like I graduated, you know what I mean? It's like I'm kind of done. I've already got my job lined up. It's like, second semester, and this group shows up, and they're like, so what we're gonna do is break us into groups, and they're like, in small groups, and you have to come up with something designed for the junior, JPMA, Junior Product Manufacturers Association of America. So I sit down with my group of like 3 people, and I'm like, guys, we don't want to win this. We just want to crank something out that's really lame. We're going to lose, and then we'll be on somebody else's team, and we'll just be like a weak link on that team. And then we will graduate, and we will know nothing about this, and we don't care. And they're like, perfect. So everybody starts designing and going bananas on what they're going to do. My team, we have 2 weeks. We go out every single night. And then the night before it was due, we show up in our studio, and I go, I have an idea. Everybody, we have foam core. I said, cut out an animal, draw it. It's a jungle animal, just draw it. And I went, we had a pool in our basement of our fraternity house party. We bought like a Sears and Roebuck, like above ground pool, and put it in our basement. with a lot of extension cords around it for lights and speakers. Not a good
what could
idea.
go wrong?
Don't recommend doing it, but we all survived. And we had to pull out the vertical blinds on one of the sliding glass doors. So I took that system and I took the vertical blinds off of it, and everyone made a foam core animal in like 30 minutes. And we basically hot glue gunned these things onto that system that already existed, and they were called jungle blinds. And we just hot glue gunned that to a wall because nobody had a nail, and we were not prepared. And we left, went home, came back, and they were like, they narrowed it down from like 30 groups to like 4. And we were one of the 4 people. And I was like, what the what? I'm now a team leader? Like, we wanted to go under the, we were like, this is the worst thing. Like, ours was so bad. People were building jungle gyms for days, they were weeks, they were drawings, architectural blueprints. They had all their stuff on the wall, their concepts. We were like, jungle blinds. They were like, what's your concept? Blinds with our jungle animals and on that thing. And they were like, we literally, so now we're one of like 4. Cut to another 2 weeks to refine it. We didn't even like color in the animals more. We didn't do anything. We took it down, it fell apart. We re-glued it together like 2 weeks later, back on the wall, same thing. And they said, why didn't you do anything to it? And I said, we didn't think it needed anything. We were comfortable with where it was last time. Thank you for your recommendations, though. That was a really fun conversation. So they were like, okay, and we're thinking, now we're 4, we're not gonna win. Cut to, me and my team are on the cover of the Orangeman, which is our school newspaper, with jungle blinds in the background, and we all won $10,000. So that was my entree into product design. The reason we won is that everybody else's thing cost like $500,000 to build, and it was like there was no like it didn't. Ours literally, you could go on Kirsch's like website, order the things that you needed, and like have like like an elementary school kids could make the jungle things, and you'd out of felt and you could glue them on, and you had jungle blinds for your kids' room, which would probably scare the shit out of them. But anyways, we won. So that was my entrance into product design. It was like, yeah, can you imagine? I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, we were pissed every time we won. We were like, shit, we got to do this again. We were so upset. Anyway, so then when it started in design and, and working with clients, you always are designing like custom furniture or custom cabinet or, so we were always designing furniture, and I really do enjoy that process. So, and then when I was working in television, I knew that it was going to be a little bit harder for me when I was on Queer Eye, and it lasted for 5-6 years. We were on television. So, it was always difficult for me. I was running my company, and clients, I had private clients, and I had about 10 employees at that time. And it was difficult because I was, competing with other designers that weren't on television. And so I would always say, like, I have to dance a little bit longer and sing a little bit louder to get these jobs. And so the idea of diversifying and having furniture and product as part of what we do was a natural kind of progression with having sort of, the ability to connect with manufacturers and them knowing what we do and who we are and what we're about, which would typically not happen until you were further along in your career for them to really kind of have like a real handle on who you were and all of that. And which is very interesting because then you would get people like these really seasoned designers like Mark Hampton or whoever that would design a furniture line. And then it was so expensive that when the manufacturers would go out, it kind of didn't speak to their demographic. So it almost made more sense to get the designers when they were a little bit sort of more green and younger because they had a better, and with television, there was more of a connection to people that were buying, product like that, as opposed to, so it really was just kind of like that. So I thought this could be a great moment to take what I really was excited about, and I took industrial design classes, and then all of the things that I did, with custom furniture, and that's how I sort of started in that space, and I wanted to see if I would like it. And what I really like about it is the design part is pretty sort of typical for what we do, as designers, designing furniture. It's not anything unusual in that space. But what's really interesting about it is at High Point, when I'm there or at any of the markets that I go to, I have this opportunity to connect with designers that are coming from all over the country and outside of the country. So you really hear what people are interested in, what they need, what they're feeling. You get a sense of what markets are doing well, what markets are struggling, what markets are looking for traditional, modern, what designers feel like is missing in the market. So it's a really great opportunity to connect with your peers, and I happen to be a person that really likes that. A lot of designers, when they go to High Point, they're like stressed out. They're like, I'm in this room for like 4 or 5 days, and I'm talking to a million people, and they're like nervous. I'm like, give me all I need is a glass of wine, and I'm whatever.
Imagine that.
I'll stand there. I'm excited to talk. Kind of connect. So for me, it's always been I like it. And my team that I kind of developed over the years, there's Laura and Randy and myself and Pam, and we're there every market, and we kind of divide and conquer, and we have new licensed partners that we're working with that we're really excited about. And we always add not always, but we always try to every 2 markets add another category. We have lighting now, and we have outdoor textiles with Cravat now, and we have we have furniture, bedding, we're doing accessories now with Cyan. So we keep adding, so it's really fun, and I really enjoy it. So I enjoy the design process. I enjoy working with the team internally in my office because it's a separate group, and we kind of work on that. And we now have a showroom in New York City called Sedgwick and Brattle, which is the corner I grew up on. And I did that because I could spell both of those names, and as I said earlier, not great at spelling. So any shortcut.
So before we get in, we have some questions from the audience.
Yes.
There's one quick question, so quick answer. What is your ideal customer? Because everybody wants to only work with ideal customers. What is your ideal customer?
I would say,
and does that customer exist?
Absolutely, they exist, and they're like unicorns. They're hard to find, but I would say when you do find them, you feel you're really excited because they're confident in themselves. I think they have self-confidence. They're not pretentious, and they support the process. Whether it's financially, they are able to support the process, but also professionally, they get it. They're like, this is what I feel, this is what I'm thinking, but I lean on you as a professional to guide me. And I think that having that confidence and that trust is really important. And every once in a while, you get a client that just has the ability to hire somebody and say, look, I'm like going to an attorney or going to a doctor. You want to collaborate, but you want to let this person guide you and help you take it to a really great place. And so I think that, to me, is the ideal client. And I think that really comes from that person being confident, authentic, and comfortable in their skin. And I think that's a real foundation of a great client.
Great. Very good. All right, we have some questions in the audience. Erica Lee, I think, has a question.
Hey.
Hey, Tom. I am a longtime fan and a second time.
You think she's coming to get us? All right.
And I'm a second time caller. I got to meet you back at High Point.
That's right.
Which is fabulous. Yeah. So what is your
favorite?
Good to see you too. What is your favorite design style to work in? And when you are challenged to step out of your aesthetic comfort zone, how do you prepare for that?
I mean, I'm going to be I don't really have a preferred aesthetic that I work in. It's really more of a approach and a point of view. I tend to like things, whether I find traditional and classic environments, I tend to pare them down and make them a little bit clearer. And I think modern environments, what I love to do is give them layers and really sort of warm them up. So in an interesting way, we kind of always meet in the middle a little bit. And I always say that what I do as a designer, sort of it cools down a Georgian and it warms up a loft. And it's sort of, that's kind of what we do, you know? And I think that it's about creating balance. And I think that that is really what I do in design. Whether I'm working with a client that is on the Upper East Side in New York City, or in a house in, let's say, Connecticut, or in outside of Philadelphia, that's a traditional, you know, home. It's really about creating that balance. And if it's a city apartment, a glass apartment in any city in, you know, Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, New York, wherever, it's about giving that space texture and depth and warmth that balances all of the glass and the steel that you're sort of getting, and all of the sheetrock. So to me, it's really about looking at that. If you're working with a renovated barn, to me, it's about bringing in sort of cool elements in ways to sort of pare it down so that you really see the actual structure of that barn. It's not about layering. It's really about sort of simplification. Whereas when you have that glass box, you know, in any city, or you do want to add those layers to it and bring in, you know, beautiful, you know, live edge dining table and a beautiful wood, because that's where you're going to get your warmth from, because the space itself is very cool. So you're looking at creating balance. And I think that what we look at as designers, what we tend to, you know, it's funny, they always say when they show faces, we as humans gravitate towards symmetry. So the more symmetrical a face is, the more we deem it attractive. That's kind of, and I think that symmetry and balance in space isn't so much about symmetry in design, it's really about balance. When you feel like something is well balanced, when you feel like it's comfortable, it's beautiful, it's inviting, it's thoughtful, when it has all of those elements and it's well balanced, it's, you know, it's appealing. It's the same thing, you know, it's like, you know, when you get in a car and it's like this, it's because it's not well balanced and it sucks, right? You don't really want to go fast in it because it feels like it's going to fall apart. So it's just, to me, it's really about balance. And I think that whatever aesthetic you're working in, it's really about trying to create that, you know, kind of thing. I also think, look, I mean, I think in relationships, it's about balance. And I think in friendships and family and architecture and design, I mean, I just think balance is one of those words for me that is like a real go-to. And I would say my aesthetic is really based in that balancing act.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy? Hello.
Oh, all right.
I'm so sorry.
Hello, you saying hello?
I have to tell you, we use, just as a side note, your Eastern accent bedding. We love.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. We're doing a big party with them this fall. We're doing a big launch again, and they're great. They're such a wonderful. They're amazing. Ridvan and his team are so amazing to work with, and we have so much fun with that. Yeah, they were just in our studio in New York, and we were just kind of getting things ready for this fall now, and also sort of getting sort of our ducks in a row for spring. It's amazing how ahead we always have to be.
Yes.
And it's like the minute we go to High Point, we like leave and we have like 2 weeks, and then they're like, okay, what's next? And we're like, oh my God, like I haven't even unpacked my bags yet.
Well, my question has two parts. First, is there a favorite trend that you see on the horizon?
Yes, I would say, I mean, the trend that I'm seeing, and this is, I think it's not even, I see it now, and I think it's going to stay on the horizon. And I will give you what I think that's going to evolve into a little bit. But I think the trend that we are experiencing right now in design in general is that there isn't really a trend. Today, there is no trend. The trend is it's really about bringing different elements together and creating your unique and authentic combination, personalizing your space, personalizing your outfit, personalizing your taking something like someone that's making something they've made for years food-wise and then adding something that they've experienced on a trip. Like, God, I think it'd be great if I added cumin to this, or people are having those kind of relationships with things that are creative. And I think it's really exciting because it's not about following anybody else. It's not about looking at magazines to copy. It's really about sort of looking inward and saying, like, who am I? Do I like to cook? Do I like to entertain? Do I like to go out to dinner? Do I have a family? Do I live in the city? Do I live in the country? Like, when I entertain, do people sit at a table? Do they eat it, or is it buffet? Like, how do I do this? And instead of following a trend, it's really, you are your trend maker. You follow your instincts and the way you live, and you live your best life, and you live in the way that you want to the way you see it. And I think that's what's really exciting, is personalizing your environment, personalizing your spaces, helping your clients sort of, rather than do what they think they're supposed to do what's authentic and intuitive to the way they live. And it's not about sort of, look at this beautiful room that I don't use because it's like so formal. It's like, look at this great room that I literally, you need the jaws of life to get me out of it because I love being in the space. That is the way, that's the trend. The trend is, being authentic and personalizing, whether it's your own space or your client spaces, really giving them something that tells their story and does it in an authentic, kind of cool way. I think that's the trend. And I think what's happening is that a lot of the influences that we've seen over the last few years that are kind of mid-century inspired or 70s or maybe even 80s inspired, which I think that if not overused can be really kind of a cool little injection into a space. You're going to start seeing some really classic moments start to be injected in again, which I think will be fun, because that sort of post-80s thing is going to start to happen again, where it was a little bit of the kind of, you're going to see the wing chair maybe in a little bit more of a refreshed way. But those kinds of details are going to come back, I think, a little bit more as we move forward. Little bit more traditional, but not traditional in the way we've seen it before, and not truly traditional. A real mix of all of the things that we just talked about. But it's about creating that balance for your client that really tells their story. If they hated the 70s or the 80s, then that won't be a part of it. But it will have those other pieces, and it will have things hopefully that they grew up with, or things that remind them of what they grew up with, and things that are current, and then things that are sort of classic. And then also you have to look at your architecture and your location are very important guidelines as to what you're going to do. Your client is one part of the solution. You, of course, are the facilitator and the person that's going to really creatively problem solve this design concept. And then you also want to look at the architecture and the location, because that plays into the environment. I mean, if you're designing something for someone that lives in New Orleans, that is very different than someone who lives in Idaho or in Connecticut or in along the coast in Cape Cod. So but they may be in the very similar architecture. So you want to look at the architecture and you have to respond to that. You want to look at the environment and the location and the geography, and you want to respond to that. And you also want to look at your client and sort of help tell their story. And then you sort of bring your vision into it and how you creatively connect those dots. So I think to me, that's the trend.
Yes.
And I think it's actually what we should have been doing for many, many, many years. Because I think trends are really interesting as inspiration, but they're not the solution.
Sure. And I think Decorating Den has taught us that from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Get to know your client.
Yeah, get to know your client and help them on their journey and help them tell their story and create that trust and that bond that they feel like you're there for them not just to sell them a bunch of stuff.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's a business, but it's a business of we're helping people sort of live better. And part of that is, being authentic to sort of the way they live. And it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
For sure.
And that's what gives us value, I think, over just selling product.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I saw some of your art at Wendover
Yes.
this past fall, and I was wondering what inspires your artwork.
Artists. And I live in New York City. I live in the art gallery district, and I'm always in the art galleries. When I travel, I always am interested in sort of seeing what's happening in the art world. I think that's a really great and creative and richly creative place to start. And it's really interesting to see color and texture and pattern. Even if you're not into modern art, it's a really great medium to understand. Even if you're not, I always say, you have to really be a classic or classical painter, you have to understand modernism, and to be a really modern painter, you have to understand the classics. So, and the same thing with architecture. The best modern architects have studied classical architecture. So you have to know the rules to break the rules, and I think art is a really exciting and dynamic place to sort of vicariously sort of learn about what's going on in the world of creativity through the eyes of people who are kind of setting the standard for what's happening. And I think that artists influence fashion, they influence architecture, they influence fashion design and restaurant design, and it's all of those things play really well together. So I think that my art really is influenced by the world of art. And I always try to create a collection that feels curated and collected and that feels like real art. I think I broke into the art space because I was doing hotels, and when I was going and looking at commercial art, because that's what you need to purchase when you do hotels, I wasn't really loving a lot of the art that I was seeing. It felt like commercial art. It just looked like what you see in every hotel historically. And I thought, I wish there was art that really looked like it was coming out of like an artist's studio, not off of a conveyor belt. And so I started creating art for the hotels, and then the person that owns the art group that makes commercial art that I work with came to me and said, hey, would you ever do this for us? Because we love that your art is sort of inspired by real art, not just sort of this reproduction of kind of what we've come to know as production art. And I think as a whole, that industry is changing and becoming more, again, multifaceted and more interesting. And their technology is really amazing, what they can do now digitally, and just it is amazing. Like they can do now what they can print, the quality they can print, the depth they can print, and all of the things that they can do digitally, and even with like with machines that give it this texture and all these beautiful details that you could only do by hand before. And it will never replace art, collectible art. It's just a great opportunity that when you walk into a restaurant or a great hotel, or you're doing a home that the clients have that maybe is like a ski house that they rent, or it's a beach house where all the doors open up and real art would be destroyed. So you have to have things that are beautiful, but that are not going to have a problem with the elements. So there's always going to be a situation for art that is not collectible. And so and also it's really great, like if you have clients that they have a couple really great pieces of art that they love and they're willing to maybe buy a couple more, but they have a big house and there's hallways and guest bedrooms and there's all these areas where you need that kind of thing to happen, and you don't want it to have like, why are these really interesting things, and then all of a sudden the stuff that feels very basic and very predictable. So it was really fun to work with them to kind of create and kind of just push the boundaries of what we come to expect from from production art.
All right, we have time for one more quick question. Kristen?
Here he goes. You ready? Who's that? You say no? Okay, I know. You're very nice. What a dick. He's just
Good
like,
to see you, Tom.
all
and
right.
Margo.
You don't have to be a jerk to everybody. All right.
Well, I love this beautiful room you're showing us on the screen. It's very colorful.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, that was a client's library is a funny word these days because we don't really use them the way we used to. Everything is available on a tablet. So it's really about having the things that you like to have around you, like books on things that you are interested in, whether it's architecture, design, or watches, or football, or whatever. And then creating a space that's comfortable that you can go into and pull your tablet or your laptop out and do the research that you need to do on whatever it is you're doing. And that's really what the library was. So today, libraries to me are all about having a very, very big screen, built into the room. Having the things, books and objects and things about the things that you love, and being able to go into that space and have technology sort of take you where you need to go to know what you need to know about. And that's, to me, the modern library. So I always like them to feel fresh and kind of vibrant, because that's the way that we sort of interact with information now, in this kind of like fast, kind of crisp way.
Well, it leads us to the question, and that is, what's your favorite color or colors that you love to work with?
Yeah.
And do you steer your clients in that direction as well?
Color is, I definitely love blue across the board. And I think, it's sort of very predictable for, I think it's a very likable color. Mm-hmm. It's a color of water, it's a color of sky. It's fresh, it's refreshing. It goes really well with almost, everything. And there's a lot of variation in it, and you can really play it in many different directions. So I do love blue. I'm a big fan of green. I'm a big fan of red. I love color. I do love color. Mm-hmm. But I think blue is my favorite color. I'm in a blue blazer. I'm in that blue, the blue room. The blue's always kind of part of my thing. And I would say green's probably my second favorite color. But wait, what was the other question?
Do you steer your clients in those color directions?
It's interesting. Some clients have a color sense, and some clients do not know what color they really gravitate towards. I had a TV show called Dress My Nest. And the idea of that show was about women. It was a show were only women clients, and they were women who had like a really great sensibility when it would come to their fashion. So they were either like very classic but really beautifully put together, or really kind of hip and cool, or all texture and kind of easy and loose. Whatever it was, they had a really great handle on their personal aesthetic. They had no clue when it came to interior design, and they didn't know what they liked. So what I would do is I would kind of walk them through their closet, and I would say, okay, let's look at what you have in your closet. Like, you have no color, it's all texture, it's all neutrals, it's all earth tones, it's all monochromatic. So let's use this as like your aesthetic. Or you go in their closet and they have this explosion of color, or it's very traditional, or it's very kind of like clean and modern and like kind of Halston, like kind of, flowy. So all of a sudden you can kind of like, for someone that really doesn't have an understanding of what their aesthetic is, you can use something that they are very proficient at. Like if you talk to a guy, one of your clients' husbands, or if you have a single client guy or a couple of guys, you ask them about, what's their favorite color, or what they like in design. A lot of the times they're like, I have no idea. Okay, what's your favorite car? Oh, they could talk to you for an hour about that. What's the favorite color that car comes in? Well, they used to come in this matte gray, but now they do it in this like really crazy, like British racing green, but it's like really, it's a little bit brighter. And they'll talk about that for another 3 hours. And then you just talk to them about whether it's boats or cars or watches or, airplanes or whatever they're interested in. And same thing with girls. You kind of find whatever it is, or it could be the same thing. It could be cars, or it could be, they could garden, and they might have, this is my favorite flower, what's that color? And all of a sudden they connect with something, and you give them like a connection. They're like, okay, I think this, yeah, I do love this color. And some people just kind of have that, and other people need maybe a little bit of help on that journey. But I think, I try to give people something that they can connect with, not something, I try to explain to them why I connect with what I connect with. I connect with blue because I'm a boater, I love being on the water, and when I'm on my boat, my favorite thing is like when it's just all sky above you and all water, and you're just in this kind of like literally sea of blue, and you're hanging out with your friends listening to music, and the dogs have life preservers on, and like that's my happy place.
Yeah.
So that's why this is my favorite color, and you need to have your favorite moment, whether it's automotive or whatever it is that inspires you, that you can connect with, that you identify, and that you have an emotional connection with that, and that is how that's what I guide people to do. And if that doesn't work, I just say, so blue's your color.
Very good.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Well, we could probably sit up here and talk all day long, but we just don't have the time to do that, unfortunately. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Tom is going to be.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. And congratulations. It was really, you guys are really doing cool things. It's awesome. And it was fun to get to sort of hear a lot of the stories and meet a lot of the owners. And I apologize in advance about my little rescue dog, but he really is sweet. He's just kind of a dick.
But we will be down in the design center, so he'll be there for at least a little bit amount of time. So if you want pictures, whatever, if you have a favorite question you want to ask him, please save it for then. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great. Thanks, guys. No.